What I've been doing for
Stay
70
long.
years. I've been living dead, you know?
Yeah. Never go down.
Living dead, okay. Hi, welcome back to Senate Economic Development, where we are actually alive. And so what we are going to do is we are just going to quickly finish going through a memo we have from Betsy. And then we are going to just walk through the changes that we're developing in an amendment, which we're hoping to have ready to go for public discussion at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning so that we can vote on it and present it on the floor so that we can send it to the House tomorrow morning at 10.
Great.
So to that end, I think, Alex, would you finish taking us through? I think we were, Keisha and you we were at removing the sunsets on CHIP and TIF, which we had agreed we're a hard no, pretty much on that, I believe.
We might I might just keep massaging in my mind like a housing target related CHIP.
Okay,
sunset.
so you,
but TIF, it would be it's a lot to
not
just
on
repeal
TIF.
TIF. That's you guys.
Not on TIF, maybe.
Senator Cummings can weigh in tomorrow.
Also, you know, I don't know about everybody else's, I'm happy to do 35, which is where it left this committee for review. So I'm, as we go. So the next one was removing the perpetuity requirements. I think we're working on that.
I think I was starting to say that phrase exclusively as a bona fide domicile in perpetuity is impossible for any municipality to do. Burlington has a hard time doing that with its 30-day rule on short-term rentals. We are working on language that just says none of these should be offered initially as a short-term rental and putting that where it needs to go. And I'm working on a definition with the commissioner of affordable housing, where we tend to have it in other areas of law at 80% AMI for rental and 120% for ownership. And we had
higher.
Well, we
started to 150.
So we started, you're going where I'm going. We started a conversation in this committee, but we had to move it about how we might look at moderate income housing.
That's where
and
the big
define it for now. And that's what I sent the affordable housing advocates to do, I felt like, so that we didn't create new definitions of affordable housing and other types of housing out of nowhere. But right now, what I have drafted, and you'll see in an email, is defining moderate income housing development as having at least 25% of units initially offered at 150% of AMI or less. I don't know why it took everybody months of.
No, I think we've been at
here we are.
150 for a while. Okay, great. And
yeah.
So the last one, which we hadn't discussed at all, was loosening the rulemaking requirement. Do you want to chat about that on behalf of Betsy?
I'll do my best. Just they're looking for the ability to adopt interim rules.
Right.
You all discussed this already. It could be 12 to 18 months before you could adopt rules. And TIF operates under interim rules all the time. It's something that Betsy's equipped to do.
So we would look at adopting interim rules for CHIP.
Right. That's right.
Just enables. How long does it take to do the interim rules?
And I never introduced myself. Alex Farrell, Commissioner of the Department
You did a couple times.
Community Development. All right. I'm not sure. Of course,
David, here we have somebody who sits on rules. How long do interim rules take?
I don't even recall seeing any.
Well, LCAR.
ICAR, then LCAR.
Right.
That's the longer term.
Yeah, that's the interim rules are so that you can wait to get in front of LCAR.
It's something she can accomplish. My guess is in shorter time period than
I think
18 months.
I believe, and Jessica will be able to follow up on the email thread later if necessary, but I believe what she's seeking is the authority for Betsy to adopt interim rules.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, let's give it to her then.
And the question is, with interim rules, are there any strings attached to it that are not attached to permanent rules that will impede what we're trying to do?
And do people get attached to interim rules that may not become permanent?
And is there any downside to that?
Right. I would suspect Betsy would try to take as permissive an approach to interim rules as possible within the bounds of what you're all.
It's just a question that I think we ought to know the answer to, because one of the reasons we're doing all of these things regarding housing is time, and management of time. And if we're adopting something that will take forever to do, then we need to figure another way to do it.
Well, and that's why interim rules is a
Interim
great
rules
idea.
sounds great, but I just want to make sure we understand what we're getting into or not getting into.
Well, I think interim rules, if you're the one implementing, it's just more humane because you don't know what you don't know. So
I
you start with what you imagine to be standard VEPSI procedure, and then if you run into speed bumps, you can fix that in the permit rules.
Why don't we just invite Jessica also for 9 o'clock tomorrow morning?
She'll be
How
here.
about Damien, who's legislative counsel for Elko? You might have that information about timelines and expectations.
They'll do that.
And then there's 45-day timeline. We don't do that. Most places say you have to approve or deny. It's just inhumane, all of this, really. We're finally trying to offer something to smaller communities who wanted
Okay,
it for a
so
long
we're
time.
inviting Damien and Jessica. Okay. Okay, thank you. So we've now gotten through this
Mhm.
memo. So why don't you talk to us about
Mhm.
our plan? We are going to,
Why don't you can the
Yeah.
commissioner stay there
Sure.
because
yeah, our plan is to take what we've sort of initially agreed to, or at least
Mhm.
what we're hearing agreement on, the red flags, addressing the red flags and coming up with a proposal that
Mhm.
addresses them and that hopefully the House can say yes to. Because the whole objective here in doing an amendment instead of going to committee of conference is to save some time.
So, I mean,
Or at
I think
least-
I would make it as simple as possible,
Yeah.
which is where it is the jurisdiction of the revenue committees to limit impact on the education fund. I am looking at ways that we can compromise that we've discussed before. And areas that they're just hamstringing the development of housing without any value added to the RAM list conversation.
Right.
We are reverting back to the Senate language. The last thing that hasn't come up is the VHFA and VHCB voting members. They're likely to be receiving some of the money under this program.
Yes.
So I would make them non-voting members as well so that they can help guide the affordable housing community toward these opportunities, but then not have both sides of the equation. And these are people I love, but it just,
I'm trying to find where those, here we are,
At
we're
the
on page 25.
yeah.
So, they had suggested.
CCRPC is non-voting.
They had suggested that VHCP, VHFA, and VHCB, and you.
Well, that the commissioner would be their non-voting, but that the other two would be their
be
voting.
Yeah, which is a little awkward because they receive money from this. So
They
They
could.
would- Or they'd at least be funding projects that would benefit from
So-
this.
Right.
I think then maybe what we're talking about is 3 non-voting members.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what I just wanted to be clear. I'm asking for that.
I think at their best, they're included here as expert advice and counsel.
Absolutely. And VHFA has become expert on moderate income housing as well. So
Yes,
if they
it
need to
has.
develop more rules, that's great. I just don't think, I think it would create a lot of
Okay,
disalignment.
so
to have
I
them
think
vote.
then we're suggesting 3 non-voting members
Yes.
and listing all those.
So I was gonna work on that now,
Okay,
and I was gonna write to the legislative council folks who are responsible for all of S-127, because I'm also removing the municipal appeal language outside of the CHIP section, removing the universal design study, and returning to the Senate version of immigrant fair housing.
Yes,
To my knowledge,
So-
that's all the non-CHIP stuff that.
Senate passed,
Did you get the social security number piece for the?
yes, it's what we passed.
What we passed, the last thing we passed.
So it's Senate version of the
In
LURB, just going back to the
H479.
LURB appeals, getting rid of all the other appeal language, going back to the Senate passed on housing,
Mhm.
LURB, and what was the third one?
Universal design study.
Stripping it.
Yeah, removing it.
Removing it. Yeah,
Do we want to replace it with the study we put in H-479? I honestly can't remember. We had a different one,
I think you pulled it out of H.
No, we pulled it.
479.
but we left another one in that may not be in their version of S-127.
I'm really worried that we're gonna miss something in
Yeah.
479 in this 127 amendment.
I think we need to ask the team to tell us what changed in a document.
so we had, and they were all here, we just, again, ran out of time. So, one thing we could do is we could ask Cam to come back now and go through the other changes. Because Ellen's changes were pretty clear on. The other changes Cam has, and what's your time frame, Thomas?
I'm fine. I can be here as late as need be. This is important.
No, it is important, but I'm.
Oh, I just need to communicate by a certain
Okay.
point in time.
No, we're gonna be,
Make it.
let's be done in an hour or less.
Yeah, let's
Let's
aim
be
to
done in an
by
hour or
then.
less. My childcare ends at 6 p.m. too. That's important, people, to know
So-
that we have.
We're just,
Can I seek a point of clarification back on CHIP?
yes,
You've added a definition of moderate income housing.
Mhm.
Will you also be adding a requirement, or will it simply be in lieu of affordable housing? Because you
Yes.
mix income to affordable.
So this is a higher threshold of including moderate income housing development. So either the affordable housing development or the moderate income housing development could receive the higher increment.
Great. And you could still, so that could get you to 85 increments.
Exactly.
Otherwise, if you have neither, you could still get to 75.
Exactly.
But you're incentivized.
Right.
Thank you.
I'm thinking we could get Damien right now too. On interim rules. To go to your questions about interim rules and how long they take. We don't need to interrupt Jessica. Is Jessica available this afternoon?
She's at a site visit.
Yeah, okay. So if Damien could answer the question about interim rules, that would be great.
Jess
Okay.
will be here by 9 a.m.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So we're, just so you know, we've emailed Cam to ask him to come over, and we are emailing Damien to see if he could weigh in also. Thank you. Because we have, I agree, if we can get this over to them at 10 tomorrow morning, that would be great. On another subject altogether, while we're waiting for a moment, Randy. We hope any luck with reaching Bill Johnson or Rhonda Schmidt. Did you get their stuff?
Yeah, I got the
Okay,
stuff,
great.
yeah.
Those are our last two holdouts. We have done a rocking job here.
We want to return, I'm trying to remember where, I'm going page by page, and there
Yeah,
was
let's-
something about, we had a broader definition of the project site. Theirs got very specific
Yes,
to the
that's right.
footprint
They
of the
narrowed it.
building.
The contingent
They did.
properties, they tripped
I'm
that.
trying to figure out if that's
right.
page 5 or somewhere else.
So let's go to our as passed.
So here, page
version.
5, they dropped it.
Okay, that's, you wrote it there, because I wasn't looking at
Thank
the
you.
draft, but I
It's,
did that,
You
okay.
wanna add
it's
back-
early on.
Yes, return to the Senate.
Immediately contingent parcels. I think that's really important.
Cam's
Yes,
on,
it's
bye.
important.
Oh, great. Cam is coming.
What about the no location criteria?
I like that.
Oh, it's,
Yep, sure.
so it's in
Like,
section
anywhere in the
1908,
state, which is
patient.
better than what we have.
1908.
Yes.
Didn't we want to focus it on?
Yeah.
You know,
Is
within a half
return to the
mile,
Senate.
Mhm.
tier 1, tier 2, or something.
So
like that.
it's open now to all
I
areas.
wouldn't
Yeah,
because
sure.
it feels redundant of our land use laws that we already worked hard to pass.
Right.
So I think that was why they landed at you shouldn't have location criteria.
Because we're working on creating, I mean, it'll
You
either be
already
able
have
to be done in that area or not.
Right.
I mean, I actually like the idea that anywhere in Vermont that goes through this process, which isn't gonna circumvent regular development review.
Yeah, except for places
I like
there,
that, but
except for places where it won't be able to be built, which is already off the map.
So when we're talking infrastructure, does septic?
Well, that's one of the things I'm gonna propose, is that we strike, that we open it up, go back to the Senate language
Yes,
on,
that's the
the
first
infrastructure.
thing in my email about CHIP,
Yeah.
is reverting to the Senate version of improvements without the
Correct.
specifics.
yes.
Some town, like Fairleigh, I think it's gonna have to be a septic system.
Everybody's
Yeah.
town is gonna have a different
Yeah.
infrastructure need,
Mm-hmm,
and we should be flexible in, they should be able to do what they need to do to make it happen.
right,
On the contiguous parcels piece, Jess can talk about that tomorrow as well.
okay.
Well, do you think she could, I wonder if she could talk tonight?
Possible, she said
She's on this email.
Yeah, she'll be finishing
Okay,
around
great.
5.
She was gonna give us some language.
An alternative for the, and she was going to offer alternative Buffalo
Mhm.
language, that Betsy felt would work for this.
Okay, great.
What are we doing in the 65%? You're gonna just drop it to what we had, which was some housing, or did we pick a different threshold for that?
70,
This is 85.
85, 70.
Oh, the floor area, no floor area.
No.
Floor area is a really bad measure of units or
Just drop that
success of any kind, yeah. They should be able to be flexible. Maybe they want to do a commercial downstairs and a residential upstairs.
But you also may be in a town that has no commercial at all, period. And they
Right.
just want to do all.
And you want to do workforce housing attached to like a, you know, big warehouse, but I don't know.
As I recall, House Commerce wanted to keep effectively the sentence language.
Yeah, that's helpful. Okay.
Okay, this is so exciting on YouTube. We're waiting for our legislative council, who will be here momentarily, and this room, I have to say, is the warmest it's been in a week. So
And now it's really nice and warm outside, I think.
Oh, there's Cameron. All right.
There's Cam.
That gets me out of the chair.
He doesn't look.
No, you could stay there with him if you wanted. Do what you.
Please stay.
The shawl is so great.
Open another chair for the commissioner.
What?
There you go.
Very
generous.
My sickness.
Yeah, you want it?
Well, sure.
Well, take that was something more comfortable.
That is a little bit, I don't know why I just did this, that's all right.
That chair's painful.
Gotta be impressed that even with the heat, I'm sticking with my colors.
We're cats.
Yeah.
And they're busy and productive. Okay, Cam.
Let's all stare at it.
Welcome. Thank you.
Warm seat and everything.
So we are pretty clear, Cam, on, welcome, it's good to have you. We're clear on I think we're clearer on our CHIP amendment ideas. And, would appreciate really understanding the other changes in the bill. And we want to clarify that what we think is there is there. So if you'd be kind enough just to go through the rest of it and identify what I don't think we have a copy of it as passed by the House yet, but
I believe it is up on your website, or at least the amendment.
no, just the CHIP amendment is.
Okay, and I'll probably pull that up and work off that document as well.
Can I just ask while he's pulling it up?
Yeah.
You talked to House members and told them that we
I
are.
told them we were working on an amendment, which I thought they ought to know.
All right, for the record, Cameron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel. You will give the computer a few moments to boot up so I can get Zoom going.
So Cam, when will we have, the House, as S-127 is passed by the House, when will that be ready for us to view as an independent document?
Possibly end of day.
Okay.
Or first thing in the morning. It came to us to review, and everyone has signed off on it. I was reviewing my sections before I came over here. So as soon as I finish and let our drafting ops team know,
Okay,
then
oh, so this will help you do that work you already have.
potentially.
Okay, so let's, if you can, let's.
I'm almost there. Okay. So as you can see, I'm sharing the Ways and Means Strike All Amendment, draft 3.1. My understanding is this is the document that was posted on your webpage that you guys have been reviewing here. So if not, correct me, but
We've been looking up just the sections related to CHIP,
but that's your amendment that you've been reviewing, right, with John? Or no, he pulled just a second document for CHIP. Okay. So for purposes of what I'm gonna walk through, don't worry about any of that stuff that's in this document. I'm just gonna highlight the specific changes that were made between the House, what they proposed in 127 versus what you all just sent back to them in your amendments to 479. They're all pretty minor, so I should be able to run through these very quickly. And I'm gonna start with page 6. This is in VHIP. And I just want to highlight that you all actually proposed to change this to 9 months, and the House wanted to keep that as well. So this is funds that are set aside for the grants and the 5-year loans, the 30% of the annual funds that are set aside. Originally, as it came to you all in 479, it was 12 months. You recommended changing that to 9 months. The House was comfortable with that change as well. So that is there. I'm just highlighting that. One change that was made, there was some minor tweaks in this section related to the revolving funds and not necessarily treating it as a revolving fund. That change wasn't made, so that's a slight difference. I'm just highlighting for you all. Another quick change, another kind of relatively minor change was in the infrastructure, what is this section called? The Infrastructure Sustainability Fund? Yes, thank you, sir. This is in the application criteria. So if you all recall, at one point, there was language in here about the ranking of the community on the Vermont Community Index, I think is the official name of it. You all removed that, the House removed it as well. However, the House replaced it with what's here on line 12, the relative need and capacity of the community. So they didn't really care for the use of the index itself. There were some concerns about how that index was generated, some of the factors that went into the weighted scores. There was conversation with Doug Farnham from the administration. You all spoke with him as well about, the need or the potential of updating that index. And so the House committee they felt that the need and capacity of the community could be taken into consideration. They just didn't want to tie it to that.
It's pretty judgmental though, isn't it?
It is.
So that's eye of the beholder.
Well, I mentioned that concern to you all in the House about using the index itself, because it simply said the ranking of the community. It didn't say if you're higher up on the ranking, then you get more priority. It was just open to interpretation there for the bond bank. I agree with you, Senator, same thing here. Mm-hmm. If you have a greater need, presumably, then, the bond bank would take a look at that, but it's not mandating that it be weighed one way or the other. Yes, sir. So just commenting that it's there.
How that evaluator is used is left open.
Yes, sir. All right. And so just commenting, that's the difference. The other change, it's not really much of a substantive thing, but they broke out subdivisions 2 and 3. Where, whether the project is an expansion of an existing system and the proximity to a designated area, they were originally the same thing. They broke them out into 2. I don't see that as much of a significant difference, but just mentioning it to you also, you're there. And so people can't say that I didn't point it out to you. Okay, moving on. Page 13, Universal Design Study Committee. You all removed this study committee from your bill. It's here in the House bill. I will also comment that the $15,000 appropriated for that study committee is in the budget.
Yep.
Just so you're aware, that's one of the other differences. Let's see, we're gonna go to page 23 here because the land bank report. If you all recall, based on some conversation with the Department of Housing and Community Development, there was discussion about extending out the date of which that report has to come back to you to 2026. The House version does not include that. So
it doesn't include the land bank at all.
No, it includes the report. It's with the same language that came to you originally with the due date of 2025, this November. You all recommended extending that out for a year to 2026. So the House version of 127 still keeps that this year. So in case you wanted to extend that out, they did not make the same change that you all did. Obviously, housing appeals is still in this version. I'm not gonna walk through that. That's Ellen's, that's, you all
And we
are
will-
talking about it and dealing with that.
And we're
So
supporting the position that left the Senate.
the only other things here are, the House version maintains this VHFA offsite construction report. There was $250,000 when it started, you all took it out, and they were okay with that. Their language just kind of indicates, as, provided there are sufficient resources, VHFA shall still issue this report. VHFA, my understanding, has testified that they intend to continue to work on the report. The House committee kind of wanted to just signal to them, we would still
Feel
like
free
you
to
to
keep
do
working on it.
this. Yes, ma'am. So the House version keeps that, yours did not. And then the last thing, the House version doesn't have the rental pilot program with the state treasurer's office. Your version did.
I mean, our credit score.
Yes, ma'am. But again, I think the state treasurer has testified they had requested 100,000 for that. They
Which
didn't
they
receive
did
it in
not
the
get.
budget. So your version has that section that says,
If
if you don't
money
have
becomes
funding,
available.
right, if you don't have funding.
And
you're not
it
required
looks
to do
like
it.
they
So-
may be able to figure it out, so.
So that's the last piece, is just they have that VHFA offsite report, you have the rental payment pilot program. They both had sections that said these are contingent upon funds. And so one was an applicant.
Thomas.
What, could you,
And,
sorry.
I missed one.
No,
Go ahead.
you finished, Ken.
Well, that might be residential rental applications and unfair housing practices, that language.
That's what I skipped over, thank you.
So we
it
need to
allows
talk
me
about
to get
that,
there.
but you just missed the credit score, which
Yeah,
they took out, which they,
It was never in.
It was never
it was
their
never
bill.
in their bill, that's
So-
the problem.
so the good thing is that even though it's not in the budget, that money didn't make it into the budget, the treasurer's office has come to us saying they may be able
Right.
to do this, and they may have found somebody to do at least a limited version of it.
Okay, so I'll add restoring that to
Yes.
did we talk about this being a
No, but
proposal?
we're just gonna keep going for, and then I'm gonna, as soon as we.
So the last
I'm
piece,
gonna say-
Commissioner, and thank you for teeing me up there for comments.
Yes,
that
so
I
the
missed.
housing, unfair housing practice.
Yes, so what the House version has is here on the screen. It's slightly.
So, just on a
different.
timing front,
Yes.
our understanding is that the House passed, the House General who did this language,
Mhm.
this passed their committee and went to Ways and Means.
Yes, ma'am.
We then took their language and continued working on it.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct. So the latest language that has been worked on unfair housing was our one.
Is your language.
Correct.
It's slightly different.
Yes. And I think our work was an improvement. So just that clarifies that.
On the unfair housing, but what
On the
about the
unfair housing.
residential rental application?
No, and that's this piece, I think so this is where, the House language is, in order to conduct a background or credit check, a landlord shall accept any of the following:
This is our unfair housing.
an original or a copy of an unexpired form of government issued ID, individual
Right.
taxpayer identification number, or social security number. And then it has the fact that the application itself has to inform an applicant of that fact.
Right.
You all took this
We changed it.
and yes, ma'am, and you changed it to, and I'd have to pull it up, but yours
So this
says
is what
that
we want.
a landlord can ask for a social security number, and in the event someone doesn't have a social security number, they have to take one of the other two. So it's slightly different language.
And I think the Chris Rice supports I think the landlords support this. I think we got to a good place on this. And, I know the immigrant community and our migrant justice community, I think everybody's landed supporting this language that passed out of the Senate.
Okay,
So let's keep the Senate language on the unfair housing.
that's in
practice.
my email. Okay.
Okay?
Mhm.
And to go back to Thomas's question on the landlord certificate, was that your question?
No, this is my question, so.
Okay. Did they change anything on the landlord certificate?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Did,
And
else
then
did
the
they-
federal law verification of immigration,
okay,
that's all the
so
same.
That's all there.
we have an update, but Damon, we're gonna still want you to weigh in on interim rules and the impact of interim rules and the time frame of interim rules. That's the subject we're asking you about. So the speaker is asking us to have a conference committee. They do not want to go back and forth with amendments, and they want an up or down vote on the floor and not have So that, the request is for us to have a conference committee and not do amendments. So, we're honoring her request and we will appoint a conference committee at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. The plus is, this has been really helpful for us in forming our position on this committee. So,
May I add one other quick thing?
yeah, Minnie.
Okay. I just noticed, and I just, will mention it to you so you are aware. If you're going to keep the Universal Design Study Committee,
No, it's a negotiation point.
and so I'm just mentioning to you when you get to the conference committee as we're working out final language, et cetera, this has the committee starting on June 1, which
That's next week.
seems to be.
That's Sunday.
Right, so, right there. The members of the House of Representatives shall call the first meeting to occur on or before June 1. My recommendation at this point is to push that out, especially because the per diems aren't funded until next fiscal year. So to me, it just makes more sense
To
at this
July.
point. To July 1 or even further, however you want. I'm just mentioning it to you all in
Right.
case that is something you're also,
No, that
interested
squares
in
up with,
addressing in an amendment or in conference committee.
okay. Great. Thank you. And then I'll catch up with you on the other changes that you discussed while I was out here and we had to go to a conference. Any questions for Damien before we?
So did I miss, did they,
I'm sorry.
Commissioner here, but did they replace a study we
We're gonna
had?
hear from him too. Absolutely.
Did they replace?
No, it's the land
Okay.
bank. What they changed, it was the
Oh,
land
okay.
bank. We had pushed out that report for another year. They want it in 25.
I don't know that they had the same testimony, so.
They did not have the same.
I can't
testimony.
speak to the
We
communication
had
from the
great
department.
testimony from your guy in Michigan,
But,
Okay.
Illinois,
Oh,
on the land bank,
Michigan.
Michigan.
Yeah, Michigan.
He was great.
yeah.
So, Commissioner, yes, any other thoughts?
No, thanks, Madam Chair. I think you captured all what we want to see changed.
I think this has been incredibly helpful. And Damien, if you wanted, we had a question for you about rules with VEPSI. And VEPSI has asked that we authorize them to do interim rules on CHIP. And the question we have for you is normally rules take 18 months, often a year to 18 months.
So,
Just introduce.
for the record,
Yeah.
I'm David Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel. So typical rulemaking, it really depends on the amount of time it takes to get to the point of filing a preliminary proposed rule. So a lot of the time that's built in, if you were, for example, going out to that 18 months timeline, that would be time, that would be 10 months of time required to develop the rule before you file the initial proposed rule with the Secretary of State. Once you file with the Secretary of State, you have 8 months maximum to finalize the rule and adopt it. Otherwise, you have to start over again. Unless you get an extension from LCAR, which LCAR gives out periodically for good cause. There have been a variety of reasons. Sometimes there's pending rules at the federal level that get changed, so they need to make last minute updates. There was a medical leave in the past year that resulted in an extension where the attorney adopting or drafting the rule went out on a family and medical leave for 3 months. And so needed extra time. So there are a variety of reasons, but the development timeline going into that is, that can vary. Sometimes it's a very short development timeline, sometimes it's very long. In the interim,
So what does authorizing interim rules enable?
so I think
And
what
what's
we're
the
talking
time?
about are emergency rules. So what we will do is we'll say, typically we'll authorize the adoption of emergency rules to coincide with the adoption of the initial proposed rule. And so the agency would adopt the emergency rule, and that takes effect on the day they file it. And that's good for 6 months. So it gives them 6 months to get from the initial filing with the Secretary of State to a final proposed rule. And in order to do that, we have to notwithstand the statute to provide authorization saying that this shall constitute grounds for an emergency rule. Because typically you can only adopt an emergency rule if there's an imminent threat to public health and safety. Or the other instance where we've allowed it is if you're subject to a federal rule or an interstate compact of some sort
Right,
that
that means-
requires a rule change.
Right.
Lottery is a great example.
That's one of our more recent ones.
So in this case, I don't know a lot about your bill, but it sounds like you're contemplating a lengthy development of new rules and then trying to get those rules out as fast as possible. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, well, I don't think we're contemplating lengthy rules, where the VEPC is charged with creating rulemaking for this CHIP program, this new housing
Okay.
increment financing opportunity.
And when does CHIP take effect?
And what they're asking for, what VEPC is asking for, is the authority for interim rules, to create some interim rules, because they have TIF, we already have a TIF structure and rulemaking with TIF to go by. And I think what they're hoping for is to moderate that a bit and rework those in rulemaking for CHIP.
I'd have to defer to Jess, but I
Okay.
believe something to that effect.
Yeah.
And what's the effective date for CHIP?
On passage to get it going, I can't remember,
I mean, when is, so the.
what's our
When
section,
is the
Cam, on?
program actually going to be providing benefits that need to be subject to the rule or incentives, whatever it
It's
is?
not specified.
It's not specified.
ASAP.
Okay,
Because it's let's build homes, let's just do it, let's do it ASAP, but I think the
Okay.
time frame, we don't have the enactment section here. I can't remember.
okay. Yeah, so,
Cam, what do you have at the end of the bill? What does it say?
Well, it goes into effect on passage,
Right.
but I don't know from that point, I don't know what's built in regards to when a municipality or a project has to submit applications, review period, approval period, et cetera. So
Well, that's part of what we're gonna be negotiating.
I don't know, to Damien's question, like it goes into effect on passage, but I don't know from there when is conceivably the first project that would be approved for this. I don't know what
So Jessica could probably give us a notion tomorrow morning.
yeah,
She could. I suspect what she's gonna say is applicants aren't going to know what to anticipate
Until we formalize the project,
Right.
the program.
And again, I defer to Jess, but I'd say to whatever extent you can avoid rulemaking, requiring rulemaking in here, you're enabling them to launch sooner.
So Damien, you recall the
So-
last time you had an interim rulemaking
yeah, well,
experience?
yeah, we do, and again, I want to emphasize it's emergency rulemaking.
Not interim rulemaking.
We use it periodically for interim rules. There's no provision in the APA for interim rules, so we have to use the emergency rulemaking.
So
process.
any interim is really an emergency rulemaking.
Yes. Anything that needs to be adopted immediately without going through the public process that is the APA is an emergency rule.
So I would argue that housing at the moment is an emergency need.
And you have the authority to do that. You're the legislature, so you can notwithstand the law and say that this constitutes an emergency. What you would want to do, and I can work with John and Cameron on this,
Yeah.
is choose a date by when they have to adopt the emergency rules. And so you do this in consultation with, is it Betsy?
Yes,
yeah.
So Betsy, as to how quickly they could update their TIF rules to create CHIP rules, probably a month or two, maybe 3, something like that. You give them a date, and then require them to adopt emergency rules and then, and propose permanent rules by that time. And so the problem with the emergency rules is they're only good for 180 days. And then the permanent rules, there's no requirement that they stay the same through the process. For example, they may get comments that, hey, provision X doesn't work for this kind of developer, would you consider revising it? And then they can make adjustments through that 6-month process.
So emergency rules gives them 180 days. It'll take them a while to develop those emergency rules to figure that out. I mean, that takes some time.
That's why I would say, set a date certain a couple months out for when they
Have to adopt emergency
right.
rules.
And if they're really making just some minor adjustments to the TIF rules, then hopefully that's pretty straightforward.
And those could be in effect for 180 days, gives them time to do the rulemaking, to generate rules.
Right, and there are certainly instances, as Senator Weeks can attest, where we've had emergency rules filed a second and sometimes more times
Okay.
as rulemaking gets dragged out. The most recent instance of that was the General Assistance Emergency
Right.
Housing. Their permanent rules came in at 7 months, and so they had to re-adopt the emergency rules in the interim to keep the program authorized. So that, and the emergency rules adoption.
Just in the interest of time, I do think we're overthinking this for the purposes of a proposal in conference. If people aren't looking at the bottom of page 21, it has the normal VEPC may adopt rules reasonably necessary to implement this subchapter. And then they get very specific, and this is where we saw labor sheds and dilapidation and things that this is really hard to ask VEPC to do before, I just think we should cut those out and
Just let them
talk
go.
about it in conference, because
Right, instead of,
we don't need emergency rule, we don't need,
I think that's your fastest way.
yeah, as long as we can get,
they don't need all of
as
this.
long as we can agree that we don't need the rest of the top page 22.
Does anyone need page 22? This is supplementing the but-for test, the floor area measure, which we've taken out, and
The labor shed.
considering labor shed, I don't,
Good catch. We could just say they specific, we can just end it right there. After subchapter, right?
yes. And it had-
Less is more.
Yes.
Great. Okay, well, we're getting very prepared for us. Publicly, we're preparing for our conference committee. This is very rare that this is done publicly. Okay, I think, anything else for Damien, Cam, Alex, Chris, Sarah, whoever, Damien, hi, Megan, anything else? I think we're in good shape. So 9 o'clock, we will be back here with, but.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm getting to this piece on guidance.
Oh,
Second-
on page
Page
22.
22, the Secretary of Commerce and Community Development, while we have the Commissioner in the chair, after reasonable notice to a municipality and an opportunity for a hearing, may issue decisions to a municipality on questions and inquiries concerning the administration of housing infrastructure project statutes, rules, non-compliance. The VEPC shall prepare recommendations for the Secretary prior to any decision issued. The council may prepare recommendations in consultation with the Commissioner of Taxes, Attorney General, and State Treasurer. Secretary of Commerce shall review the recommendations of the council and issue a final written decision on each matter within 60 days following the receipt of recommendations. The Secretary may permit an appeal to be taken by any party to a superior court. Is this standard TIF?
I'm not sure.
I would just say harmonize that with standard TIF language
What's
about
the
the
Supreme Court?
Secretary's ability to issue a
Yeah, the secretary's role.
decision.
Okay, I don't think we need to keep everybody else here, do you think? Do we have anything else for everybody? I think we're in good shape. We're continuing to do prep work.
So
So we'll be here at 9 o'clock, to,
Madam Chair, do you need anything from me at this point?
what would be really helpful, because we're gonna need it tomorrow is a side-by-side, obviously. That would be great, right? And, anything else right now? If it's possible for us to just look through, if you would mind sending us your,
Do you want a list of those changes I walked through?
yeah, that would be great.
That's easy.
It's easy.
I'll have you
Just
one
email
sent out.
that over. Okay, that'd be great. Okay, all set?
So I'm gonna call this our first
You know, some,
proposal in conference.
Yeah.
It was not in vain. I think
I
we
think
need to
this
be
was very
done with the
helpful.
conference committee as soon as possible tomorrow.